Yep.
Let me tell you about my cousin, a story about my cousin in the Philippines. He was on his way to work because he had just gotten a new job. It was like a good time because he had a lot of debt racked up and his family was really struggling with the bills. They garnered all of their money and they bought him a new suit to go to work in, and they sent him off with $300. But when he came back, he was completely naked. He was bruised and he didn't have any money on him. And I'll tell you another story about my aunt. She tried almost her whole life to get here to the United States, and it wasn't even until she had to get enough money to slip under the table to the government official that she could even get a visa to Australia. So she never made it here. So what kind of government allows these kind of acts to happen? What if I told you it was a democratic government? What if I told you that it was under the rule of a man named Ferdinand Marcos, who was president of the Philippines? He's also known as the first two-term president in the Philippines, but also the man who imposed martial law. So a little background, he was elected first in 1965, and then re-elected again for a second term. But in the middle of his second term, there was a big rise in crime, in guerrilla activity, and in Muslim discontent in the southern portion of the Philippines. It was then that he decided in 1973 to contain this activity and impose martial law. And it did stabilize the Philippines for a little bit, and he did get some economic reforms going. But in the end, he was too consumed by this power and decided to hold on to it, because when martial law was lifted and elections were out again, he used his network that he had when he was still president to sway all of the votes in his favor. So, and his actions during the 1981 elections, right after martial law was lifted, were influenced by his past with injustice and crime, the temptation of money and power, and ultimately the incompatibility of the U.S. democratic system and a third world political and economic corruption. Ferdinand Marcos was not always good with his run-ins in the law. His upbringing was similar to many other Filipinos in the country at the time. There wasn't really much on anything specific in his childhood, but when he was studying law, he was then convicted of the murder of his father's political rival. He was studying to be a law student, and during his custody, while he was in custody, he finished his studies. When he went to trial, he was found guilty, and the strange thing is that he rejected a presidential pardon and decided to appeal his conviction. But then he also chose to represent himself. He ended up winning. He ended up winning the appeal, and then finally going on to start taking a more active role in the Philippine government political system. And this is important to note because this gave him a personal sense that he was better than the system. He took it on himself, and he took his own case. He took his case on by himself, and he was able to win over the judicial system that was in place at the time. So we can agree that Marcos excelled in the arena of politics, and he was presented a lot of opportunities to utilize his gift. For example, he was the youngest member of the Philippine Parliament, and he was chosen to represent his hometown province. In addition, he ultimately got the role of president, but even though it seems that his political career was seamless and perfect and without taint, if you look a little more into the actions he did behind the scenes, you'll find that there was more involved. So, for example, to gain credibility, he actually claimed to be part of a guerrilla unit during World War II that opposed Japanese activity in the Philippines. And if you don't know, I'll give you a little more background on that. The Japanese were very cruel to the Filipinos during World War II, and I have a lot of stories that from my grandma saying how they would treat the civilians. So he claimed to be a part of that movement, which is very personal to Filipinos, but then it was revealed later on that he actually did not have anything to do with those activities. like mildly affiliated, but he didn't have a leadership position like he said he did. And then it was found after he gained his credibility and gained power, then he also he used that power to get himself money so that he could live in wealth. So, but why did he do all of these things, and why is it important? I think it's because that democracy is ultimately incompatible with third world society. We see that democracy in a third world society is seen as more of a patronage system. It's more of who you know. And there's not really that trust of a legitimate system, so people are always trying to go against it to seek their own selfish needs. And this is what happened to Ferdinand Marcos in the end. He grew up in this society that encouraged this sort of behavior, that to take advantage of the system and to ultimately gain everything that you can for yourself. And when considering all of these factors of where he grew up, in the society that he grew up, he had a choice to make, but he ultimately made the wrong one in choosing to sway the votes in his favor and trying to keep the power.